Machawe samete o chivasi
I
e
see you, David. I'll pull
kamatai
you up right after the intro.
masetea achiamate. Me sawe chawatamake e sawe chamate. Matea, matea, chema sawe mate. Hi. Chatemekia aishta matekia tamatataya mohaya. E chamatea e sakataya matoi. E samatea e
How's it going, everybody? Todd Medina, Soulogy.One Studios. First show of the day. We got a new friend by the name of David Manning. We're going to get to know here. He's an energy worker. He's been trained over a 30-year period and working with large fields of multidimensional energy to co-create and transmit frequencies of possibility, potential, and healing at a collective level. He's moved through many of the darker aspects of the human condition on his journey of integration and now works with a large team of non-physical beings to help bring resolution and healing to individuals and groups. So this ought to be real interesting. In his work as a transmitter, receiver, interpreter, and translator of energy, he sees some of the major collective patterns moving on in and around the planet. He writes about these in his newsletter and conducts energy work on regular teleconferences through his website, www.davidmanningenergywork.com, and he's got a YouTube under his name, David Manning. So without further ado, let me pull him up and let's get to know this guy. Sounds very interesting. Sounds like we might learn something today. Let me just pull him up. All right. These shows resonate. Please share. Let me unmute you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Todd?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Nice to meet you. It's good to see a fresh face.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I mean, I've seen you. It's weird because I feel as if I know you already because I've watched quite a few of your videos.
Oh
So
yeah.
it, yeah, it feels like we're old friends already. Yeah.
Probably we are. Probably we are. With the way these energies are working, I don't know who I was just hanging out with in Dimension. I got up late today. I got up at 4:30 yesterday, and I stayed up till about 1:30. And I got up and have a full day. And this is a good way to start it because I don't know of any other way than just to jump in there head first, right? So to meet a new friend, you've watched the show. We don't really do a Q&A so much, although I ask questions, and
Uh-huh.
you can feel free to ask questions as well. It's a conversation where we're going to get to know each other in front of everybody. I believe that the highest level of activations, downloads, channelings, and transmissions come from conversations like this, when people just bring their raw truth to the
Yeah.
table and lay it out there. You've got quite a bio. I'm married to somebody who has a very similar bio. So I've spent the last 4 years learning to understand energy better, both on an individual basis, most importantly, but also to see the energy in the collective, at least to the degree that I can, which is primarily from this chair. Reading the energy of the of the day, because everybody seems to be going as the days go on, seem to be experiencing more and more similar things, at least people that are in these circles.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh you've been doing this a long time. We have a famous question on here, and that's, when did you wake up? Did you go through the uh wake up traumas that a lot of people did? Did you go into the matrix, go to sleep, and get woken up by something, or did
Yeah.
you just cultivate this through your whole life?
I was born quite multidimensional. So as a child, I had a lot of those weird experiences, a lot of out of body experiences. When I would close my eyes, I would be in a different world on the inside. I was always hearing voices, all of that sort of stuff. And that closed down about the age of 7. I think it needed to, so that I would have a go at a regular life. There wasn't much regularity to any bits of my life at all. And then when I was 27, it started to open back up again. And at this stage, I was using a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol, and getting deeper and deeper into addiction. So I just thought, well, I'm just going fucking crazy here. But it, the voice I recognized from my childhood, and it started showing me things, and it led me to a place in London called the College of Psychic Studies, where
Mm.
I walked into. I mean, I don't remember how I got to that place the first time. So I think there was something of a walk-in, and I was moved to that place, and I sort of came to as the door was clicking shut behind me. And for the first time in this life, I felt as if I was home, and that place became a home for me for a number of years, really. And I trained and worked there a lot, on and off, over many years, and that was a great gift to me, that place, because it really,
Mm.
I got to meet some great teachers, and I was a mess. I was totally screwed up, but people there recognized that I had something. So I was doing a healing development course, and on the second week of that course, it was an evening course, 1 evening a week. And on the second evening of that course, the leader of the course asked me to work in the clinic at the college, because he recognized that there was something, that there was potential there. And I jumped at the chance, although, looking back, I was crazy. I was, like I say, I was using a lot of drugs, but there was always this element of truth that ran through, that was
Yeah.
deeper than the impact of my addictions. And that terrified me, in a sense, because I knew the beauty and the love that I was experiencing on the inside. I knew that it would want all of me, and I wasn't anything like prepared to give all of me. I wanted the life I had, and I also wanted this. And so that created an extraordinary field of tension that literally almost killed me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting introduction, but that voice is a steady companion, and I recognize the voices and the guides that I saw then as aspects of self that get integrated as we deepen and expand on the journey. So yeah, it just continues.
Exactly. Exactly. I can relate to your description of I don't know if I would have said wanting to live in both worlds, but I guess that's the way it was. Wanting to, run with the devils and fly with the angels.
Yeah,
There was no in between. It was always one extreme to the other. And you're right. That voice was there the entire time.
yeah,
And there was something about the darker side or the wilder side of that teeter totter that it spoke and actually had dimensional experiences in that state.
yeah, totally.
Because there was I guess it was the inhibitions were gone or something was gone. I was in the same boat because I was like, I know I'm crazy. Everybody's telling me I'm crazy, but I know this is true.
Yeah,
And you try to figure out the equation to get there. But yeah, that's really interesting. They said, now you mentioned that when you went to the school that you kind of had a walk-in experience, and a lot of people have talked about that on this show, and I'm always intrigued by what their experience is like, because the idea behind it is that people that are waking up now or having similar experiences now uh, are going through the same thing others went through years ago, and so to try to get a better understanding. But now, the feeling of having a walk-in, like when did you say, you know what, I think I had a walk-in, or what did that feel like? What was that experience like?
so for me, it was only the once, and it happened because I'd never heard of this place, the College of Psychic Studies. But one day, I literally found myself walking through the front door, and I had no recollection of how I got there. So I think there was a walk-in by an aspect of me that took me there, got me on the
Yeah.
on the tube, walked me through the door, and then pushed me through the door and left. And it was like, oh, how the fuck did I get here? And
That's how we got here, isn't it? That's how we got to Earth, isn't it?
yeah,
No,
something like that. Huh? So, but there was this, apart from the shock of finding myself there was this overwhelming sense of, oh, I've come home. And I'd never, ever
yeah,
felt that in this lifetime.
yeah,
So there was this immediate sense of safety. And literally the place did open up for me in a way that was unusual. And I needed that because I was so terrified and so wounded that if it hadn't opened, I would have run. I wouldn't have stayed. I wouldn't have stayed there. So there needed to be some really soft landing space for me to help me through the shitty times I was about to go through. It was soon as
isn't that amazing how those shitty times with it came the other extreme, like the connection, the higher level of communion. And I want to ask you this, a lot of people I've noticed, including myself, have these cyclical, a cyclical pattern of like reaching a really high level of communion, even sustaining it for a while, to possibly include, like new spirit guides or whatever. And then they'll have a dip. It's like you get into that mode and you kind of go to school, and then all of a sudden everything drops and you're human, and everybody's gone. Did you ever have that experience? Because you talked about embodying, and that might be part of it. Once you embody it, then you're like, okay, what's going on now? Have you ever gone through that?
Only at times when there was some really dark bit of shadow that I had to descend into, and then it felt like everybody had gone and I was just scrambling around in the dark on my own. And that was important for me to feel that deep wound of abandonment that we all share, But there have been over the years many different integrations of what multidimensionality may be, so that now it doesn't leave. I can attempt
Yes.
to leave it, but it doesn't go anywhere, in a sense. My way of
Yeah, I get
leaving now, would be sugar. You know, I can still punish myself with sugar, which is you know, it's so yeah, I can attempt to close things down with sugar, but it doesn't. Nothing really works anymore.
Yeah.
It's just a constant.
Yeah, that's not even like that's not that's a thought that's not even allowed to live a couple of moments
Yeah,
these days.
yeah.
You know, now you are in the energy game. I mean, you are a practitioner. You know, I'll say a leader in understanding what is really a new horizon. Energy is being spoken about in a way that is not happening in science. I mean, they talk about quantum and this and that, but this is real, the injection too of real life human experiences. Now, you read energy on a collective level and on an individual basis, and you're in a very thick density. Okay. You know, I've been to a few of the big cities here in New York City, Chicago, and other places, and and it's interesting because you would go into it thinking, oh my God, this is just like a huge, dense, slow moving vibration. But there's also a lot of contrast in it. How has it been for you to be operating in London and being able to see the field?
Well,
Does
so
it?
I'm no longer in London. I had to leave London
Oh,
a couple of years ago,
okay,
but I was in London for a long, long time, 35 years altogether. I grew up
okay,
on the coast in Wales, and then moved to London when I was 19, and sort of more or less stayed there. I had a year in New York actually, and I loved cities because you could be anonymous. I could dive deep into my addiction. I was, you know, I'd grown up in a small town in a low population density. I grew up knowing I was gay, and so that was difficult, you know, in the 60s and 70s. So when I came to London, I could dive headfirst into all of my addictions, including sex. So it was literally sex, drugs, rock and roll, and then this stuff started to come in. Um, I never thought I would leave London, but about 5 years ago, it started to really feel just too intense. And, you know, my field was expanding all the time and getting more and more sensitive. So the electromagnetics were bothering me, and just the sheer volume of people, and
yeah,
the physical pollution. So I didn't have much of a life in London at the end of it, because I was just staying very much, you know, in and around my home. And then literally I was considering where I was going to live, and I knew that I wanted to live on the coast. I didn't want to go back to where I'd come from, but I needed to be by the sea. And as soon as I allowed for that to take up space inside me, I heard the words St. Leonard's on Sea, St. Leonard's on Sea, St. Leonard's on Sea. And so I came down to this little town on the coast of the south of England 2.5 years ago, and thought, oh yeah, I love this place. And so it was weird because my energy field moved here before I did. I mean, my energy field sort of clunked and connected into the field of this town, and it was like, oh, so we're moving here then. You know, it was one of those experiences. But yeah, London became, as I became more sensitive, London became unmanageable.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's you know, I find it very interesting, these big cities like New York City and London, how there is, you know, there is a light worker or light presence expanding everywhere and even there. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting to see, you know, how this is going to go down. Now you again, you read energy and you work with uh coalitions of non-physical.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much what you said. Now, oh, and you've been in this a long time. How has that been, sitting in your shoes to observe this expanding collective consciousness, this expanding awareness? I mean, that had to be, you know, a pretty significant thing to watch, because you had to be alone pretty much when you started this, you know, even though you were in that school, which I'm sure there was other people like you and me, other weirdos and crazies. But
Yeah, I mean, and that was the great gift of that place for me, in that I had connections and lots of places to talk about. They had a huge library that you could just borrow amazing books from. They had workshops, 4 or 5 workshops going on every weekend, so you could just dip in. And it was a real sort of 15 years of immersion in that field of energy. So it was extraordinary. The place it's been going for well over 100 years. But watching it, right at the start, there was this awareness that things were changing, and everybody was expecting it to happen, now, or at the year 2000 there would be a big shift. And of course nothing changed. And then it was going to be 2012, and sure enough, at that December solstice, I had the most amazing experience. And I knew there wouldn't be some amazing external shift, but internally there was an extraordinary influx of energy that I knew would change things for me. And I recognized that this was a collective inflow of light. And so it was just going to push collective darkness to the surface and amp up the field. And so I think that's what's happened, and it all along, I mean, I think I never trusted myself, because I always viewed myself as such a complete fuck up, that why would what I'm seeing be right? But over the years, I got to really trust it, because it got validated by other people, or when I talked about the experiences, other people were touched by them, that sort of thing. So it's been an ongoing process of many years of that level of validation. And I have taken very small steps. It's taken a long time for me to really get active with this, because I had such a lot of damage to unravel. It was intense and I wasn't ready. But I recognize now that there was a timing to this. And I was launched about 4 or 5 years ago by somebody that liked my work. So I went from having 1 or 2 clients a month to 12 a week overnight, and then doing the teleconferences. And right from the word go, I would have maybe 150 people signing up for the teleconferences, and that number has stayed relatively stable all the way through. So it's interesting.
I don't think you're staying busy enough. I can relate a little bit, but and so like to see this happening, I want to ask you something else too, because this comes up a lot, and I like the walk-in situation. And people, everybody seems to have been ushered in to their awakening, so to speak, by particular spirit guides or divine essences or galactic star family beings or whatever. And as time goes on, many people report, I'm no longer hearing them. They've embodied in me. And it continues to evolve, and I can use myself as an example. It seems to me like there's less and less externalization to include what I hear or what I see, although there's still some of that. Do you get to a point where everything is one voice? Your voice is singular with the universal voice. I mean, where are you at with that? Do you still have a clear externality of what you're communicating with, or do you see that conglomerate, that coalition of entities that assist you? Do you see that as part of you or separate from you?
For me, it integrated in a way back in early 2015, and there was this this integration that came into the back of my heart, and it felt, my experience of it was that literally a spaceship docked into the back of my heart and just moved through my field and just sat there. And so my field became vast, in that it was bigger than the size of London, and on that spaceship were representatives of all or many of the races in the universe, aspects of what I understand now to be aspects of DNA that we are. So they all integrated at once, and it took a while for that to land and work through. So now there's very much a sense of inner knowing. But say the other day I was what was it that was coming up? It was honeybees. I've had a lot of experiences with honeybees over the past couple of weeks, and they're offering a lot of help to humanity at this point in time, literally helping us, or they're offering to help us to ascend higher into higher dimensions. And so they kept showing up, and I thought I better ask them what they're doing. So when I connected with the energy of honeybee, I got a vocal, a bit of vocal information. So it's like that. It's like if I wanted to connect, like I do a lot of work with crystals. So if I wanted to connect with, say, this piece of aquamarine, I can get a verbal message from it, but for my own guidance, it sort of upwells from the inside out, if that makes sense.
I get that. So as I say, within, without, and I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm just trying to bring this into alignment for myself and hopefully for other people that are listening. But it sounds like, as within, without. So at some level, and we use you as an example, let's just say, and this is a theory, I guess, you're opening code that may have been shut down within your body or bodies, and you're able to access whatever you want that is available. That's kind of the way I'm seeing it with you. And when I look at the collective and the way these energies come down, I'd love to get your perspective on this. It seems like the same thing happens. In other words, on a collective level, maybe the explanation is enough people have done enough work to open up code within themselves, then makes it available to the collective. Doesn't mean that everybody gets it, but it means that it's available if you're out there looking for it. So, that's a very good explanation to me. I can understand that probably better than anyone that has explained it to me, not taking anything away from them. Now, do you specifically work with this energy field or this morphic field, or these, I like what you said, the aspects of DNA, this team? Do you work with them specifically on a certain, lack of a better word, agenda, or a certain mission or purpose?
They work with me rather than, it's like, okay, come on, get your act together and let's get on with this. And for me, I was always scared to step forward. It was, it took me years to get over my awkwardness, my shyness, all of that sort of stuff. I think they have an agenda, and I sort of go along with it. So I get shown things, or things crop up in awareness, or I'll see in my one-to-one work, the same stories will be emerging over a period, and I think, okay, this is a collective story here. We need to look at this. And then as soon as I decide to offer, say, a teleconference, then more pieces of the story start to land. And so if I look back over the work I've done, there has been a real movement through a lot of the big pieces of collective wounding, I think. And when we form a group, we always work with a large field of energy on the teleconference, and that field of energy is then offered back to the wider collective as a template of possibility, to say, here, we've worked through this. It's available now in the collective if other people want to do it. So we started with, say, the witch burnings. That I could see that for years as a big scar in the collective psyche, because it was the church working over a period of hundreds of years in the Middle Ages, when the population was largely uneducated, to literally terrify vast tracts of the population, to disconnect them from the divine feminine, from their intuition, and funnel everybody into the idea that the only way you could do this was through the church. And of course, that's just a nasty, vicious lie, which is falling apart, very nicely now. But that piece of work, the Inquisition, was a significant piece of work in terms of helping people just to release that deep scar in the collective and personal psyche, because often women, particularly women, would be starting to do this work, and they would hit this wall of terror in them. That was a past life personal and collective wound around, if I do this, I'm going to die. I'm going to be burnt at the stake, you know. And that's, so it worked through there. And then there was another one on the enslavement, the genetics of enslavement, how we had been tampered with. And I got to see all these different stories coming together. It was like, oh, at last I realized I needed to offer something on this. And so it's tracked through lots of things. And there's been a huge process of clearing until just recently. What's happened is the field is ready to work in a different way. So it's like we've moved through a lot of the clearing, and now people are in a space where it's time for us to stand up and say, okay, we can join together as a collective field and make or have an energetic impact for the planet. And so the other week I was watching television, and there was nothing on but documentaries about corruption in, you know, high finance, billionaires and all of this sort of stuff. And at last I recognized I was needed to watch this. And as I watched it, I saw the fields of corruption around the planet that have been active for thousands of years, but they're now ready for us to stand up to them and say, enough. Now we're no longer willing to have this as the major active force on the planet. There's something else starting to work, but we have to take a stand and say, okay, no.
Yeah. I'm in total agreement with you. I think that is the energy. And that was my next question, but since you're telepathic, you answered it already pretty much. But no, and that is this, okay? So I totally align with what you're saying. I totally resonate with what you're saying. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. This is a personal trip. And yeah, we could boycott and protest and march, but that's not, let's say, the highest potential action. The highest potential action is coming from the individual, be it etheric, physical, non-physical actions and intentions that we put forward, first and foremost, to expand ourselves, like you talked about, because the core of your story is about your personal transformation, you know, your personal journey, and then everything else comes from there. But yeah, and I was going to ask you, you know, how do you see the field now? And based on what you're telling me, and please add to it, what I'm getting is what I'm feeling, and that is it's time to go to work. And I love what you said about the fear that was in our cellular, or however you want to put it, in our ancestral lineage, that we can now move forward on an individual level with what gives us bliss, gives us the most joy, feels the most intuitively feels right, you know, like this is my higher purpose, this is why I'm here, this is my piece of the puzzle. But to be able to move forward unencumbered, to be able to move forward and have faith that that same suppression and the hangings and the oppression and everything is not coming. It really feels like something has left the building, you know, like they say in America, Elvis has left the building. Well, the big boogeyman or whatever that energy was has left the building, or maybe it's Toto running behind the curtain saying, hey, there's a man back here acting like he's a omniscient wizard. In other words, we have found out we are the power. So moving ahead unencumbered, is that part of what you're seeing? Are you seeing like a swell of individuality, you know, service to the collective? Are you confidence, spiritual confidence, expansion, creation? Are you seeing that happening?
Yeah,
Do you see that?
and I think, you know, one of the ways it's really showing up now is all of a sudden there's a huge rise in environmental awareness, and that has started to peak now. So I think, now I'm not an astrologer, but from what I'm hearing, there's some big conjunction on the 12th of January, yeah? And that I think is going to help. It's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Like I say, I'm not an astrologer, so I don't really know what it means, but I'm aware that it is going to tip us into a place now where what we have allowed to manifest and hold sway on the planet, all of a sudden, the collective, and that's you, me, and millions of individuals around the world, are sort of with one voice going to start to say, fuck no, it's not okay it's
I'm
not
on your
okay
team.
for no, it's not okay for one person to have hundreds of billions of dollars or pounds, and vast swathes of the population to go destitute. And it's not about there's a lack of abundance, it's just this corralling of the resources of the
Yeah.
planet that has happened.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a huge shift coming. It's not going to be immediate or overnight, but we're really starting to see it, and I think it's going to gather pace.
Yeah.
And
I
that
mean,
for me is really exciting. So I'm seeing the
yeah.
collective field is starting to boil now in a way. Um, it is literally coming to the boil, I think. So things
Yeah.
are
I
starting to change.
Yeah, I think so. So I had a lady on. We had a lady on, a beautiful lady, Liliana Lee Tech, I think was her last name, yesterday morning, and that's what she's done. She got to wake up 4 years ago. She does quite a few different things, energy work. One of the things she was directed to do, or remembered, or whatever, has to do with the alignment of planets and the movements of planets and all that stuff, which I don't understand. But she did mention that, and I don't remember the exact date, but it must be January 12th, this Pluto Saturn thing. And she said that the last time this occurred was right after the Dark Ages, moving into the Renaissance, right. And she said specifically right after all the hangings and the burnings and all that, right after those couple of that period of time, Middle Ages, Dark Ages. So that aligns with what she said. The other thing that you're saying that I love too is, again, you can see the collective coming together. I mean,
Yeah,
at least from where I'm standing, and maybe it's just the people that I observe or the environment I observe, but it seems very much there seems to be very much a part of it seems to be, hey, I've had enough, and whether it's in a relationship or my job or where I live or the habits or patterns that I have, I've had enough. It's time to do me, and in that paradoxical equation, when you're doing me selflessly, I mean selfish in the higher sense, to thine own self be true, there seems to be a simultaneous expansion in your external experience, and even in the collective consciousness that we all share together.
yeah.
So it's a new math, and it's very extraordinary.
It
Yeah,
is. It's like Marianne Williams said in that famous speech that when you shine your light, you give other people permission to shine theirs,
yeah,
and it creates this extraordinary ripple effect. But also, what I'm seeing now, uh, there are, from my perception, then thousands of years ago, the Earth withdrew a lot of the very rich energies of co-creation deep into her core to allow us to have this phenomenal experience of density that we've been on for whatever 13,000 years, maybe since the fall of Atlantis. Yeah, now those energies are cracking open, and I started to see those. I've always had a long association with dragons because they were the national symbol of the country I was born in, and so I was brought up with that as a mythology, and they have been a big part of my life because I could see the dragons moving in the earth as the lines of energy. Now they're starting to move in a much more definite, much more powerful way. And this is the Kundalini of the earth. It's on the move again. And it's going to start impacting. It's going to become available to us again for creation that is in alignment with the earth's highest possibilities, I think. And of
yeah,
course, we've given over the planet to those with the most powerful voice, and now it's owned by corporations. That's going to start changing too, I think, in the next couple of years. People or corporations are going to have to recognize that they have to put social responsibility above profits, and
yeah.
that will start to happen too. I think in fact, it's already starting to.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about the dragons, especially since about this time last year, which is, as an individual goes, so goes a collective. I'd never really seen much of dragons until a year ago, and they've popped in and popped out a lot. And then with Morgan and I, that's happened too, as well. A lot of that has been with her, when we connect. But specifically in the last, 2 weeks, there's been a really strong impact from them. You could call it visitation or communion connection, dimensional, whatever. And it seems to be three things. One is, we're coming in and we're going to clean out again, but this time we got a Q-tip, a cosmic Q-tip. So we're going to get all the grizzles out, get ready. It's been noticeably impactful physically
Yeah.
on the body. Two is it's time to get to work. Let's go. Let's get this done. And we're speeding it up a little bit, not because there's a sense of urgency, but maybe there's a window of opportunity where you can gain and activate what's available to the max, so we can get this thing done. But it's been a really strong impression, and I know it's not just in our lives because I see other people talking about it, and people have a lot of questions around it. You talk about the dragons being in some way like the grids within the earth, right? I've seen and heard in regard to the dragons that they were here like almost like the original creators of earth. This is energy. I know we're talking now. They're coming out onto the surface is kind of what I'm getting from you. What kind of is that another energy that's very close to us, that's become available to us, not just to be shown something, but to actually utilize and integrate?
Yeah, I think it's time for us to embody dragon-like qualities. So it's okay to be fierce. It's okay to be fiery. It's okay to embody that energy and tell it how it is. It's okay to burn down structures that are corrupt and rotten. I think that's what we're going to see. These things are going to, I mean, and maybe the fires we're seeing all over the planet are an aspect of this. But from my perception, the dragons are carrying, if you like, these huge currents of energy from the earth that it's now time for us to work with again. And these are the currents of co-creation and manifestation that haven't been as available for many thousands of years. So we get to recreate the world that we want to live in.
Yeah, yeah. And from your perspective, in observing this whole evolution of, let's just say, even to back to 2012, as this community's grown or this movement's grown, uh, and the quantum seems to have come in as a linear is fading, which ultimately I guess means we won't have the impression of time or space and so on. I guess where I'm going with this is it seems to be moving extremely fast.
Yeah.
I mean, the level of information exchange, codes activated and opened up and actualized and so on. I mean, does is anything, I mean, people say, well, it's going to be 2022 or 2030 or 2035 before this or this happens. I mean, can we really even say that? I mean, it seems to be moving so fast, and ultimately we are unlimited potential. At least that's what the intel is, that we couldn't just transform this thing at the drop of a dime, not just collectively, but within ourselves. And I'm talking, in terms of teleporting, bilocating, instant manifestation, higher sensitivities or senses or skills and abilities coming into the fold immediately. Do you see that, or do you see it being like a slow boat turning around?
I think it's a bit of both. There will always be individuals that are moving quite a way ahead of the collective, but the collective, in effect, we are one body of humanity, and it has its own pace too. There was, from my perception, now back in the summer, I was in a hospital waiting room. I had my second experience with cancer this year, which both have been really, really interesting, and very multidimensional experiences. But so I was sitting in a waiting room waiting to see my oncologist, and the waiting room was getting really thick and dense with other people waiting to see their oncologist. So you can imagine a room full of people dealing with cancer. The energy was not great. So I thought, well, I'll just clear the space, not clear or work with individuals. I'll just clear the space. And immediately I was told, don't do that. Let these people live with the choices they have made, because if you impose clarity upon them, that's not That's not what they've chosen. And they are, in effect, happy with the choices they've made. And this was the first really clear demonstration that I had seen that there was a dimensional divide happening, that there's a real splitting of dimensions, so that it's no longer appropriate for me to reach over and help people or offer energy to people that aren't engaged in this journey, because it's just a waste. And it's and that sounds really harsh, but there are a lot
No,
of
I don't think that. Yeah,
that are
I don't think
awakening,
that's.
that are really active in this journey, and a lot of places we can use our energy, but you know when you're talking to somebody where there's no spark, in essence, you know. um
Yeah,
so so yeah,
I
I think
like that. I like that I like that description of that conversation, because it sounds like it sounds like what we're doing, or what you're being told, is, and there has been a shift. It would most notably, like, from the yogi guru type of frequency to more of a let's call it a 5D or new earth healer type. Let me show you how to do this yourself kind of thing. But what I love about that exchange is it sounds like a soul frequency, like this. Like, in other words, if I was the voice and I said, David, these are the journeys these souls have chosen for
yeah,
themselves, and leave that alone. And I like that, because it takes the emphasis off of, the personalization off of, oh, it's Todd, or Bill or Joe. It's in looking at it as a human only thing. This is a journey, as I listen to you, that the soul has chosen, be that human aspect conscious or not, conscious of it or not. Because in time, I guess they all will become, conscious at their own level. I still think it's quite possible that everyone's beating at the same vibration. It just doesn't look that way.
maybe, maybe. And one of the things that I think we need to really reevaluate our beliefs around death, because we've really
Yeah.
been sold a bill of goods around what this is. And it is simply the stepping out of the body, but there is no end to our existence. And yet there is such extraordinary terror around that process. So, I mean, and I'm lucky in the sense that I've had these two experiences with the cancer that really forced me to look at that and to stare it in the face. And in the first one, I was given a choice, do you want to die or do you want to live? And I realized that I had been living with my addictions as if I wanted to die. And so I made a choice to live, and the cancer was gone. A terminal cancer. The doctors had said there was nothing more they could do. And then the cancer was gone within a month. And that was simply aligning myself with the intention to live. But I think it was made clear to me that death was not a mistake or a waste or a wrong choice, that I would be welcomed back into those other dimensions with open arms if that's what I chose. It was a valid choice. And so it's time for us to really reevaluate death, because it is about our rising, or our moving into and accepting higher frequencies for ourselves whilst we're in a body. And the whole belief system we have around death literally locks us into lower dimensions than we currently need to be, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get that. And you're right. That's the big domino, and
Yeah.
what's so, I always laugh about it, to myself, and think, and you got to pay for your own funeral to leave here, which really, you know, it shows you how absurd it is. But what an incredibly ingenious game we designed.
Yeah.
I mean, to fall that. And I want to ask you about this, because I think people are working through this now. Even in the if I go down the news feed into the different groups and all the stuff that I've, that's accumulated on my own personal social media, uh, you're starting to see people separating from the story. Now you've got some people out there going, "Hey, we need to hang the Pope and the Vatican. It needs to be exposed, and go. You support Q and Trump, and they're changing and all that stuff. And the galactics are in the sky, and it'll be over soon." Um, but there's another part that's saying, you know what? That's not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah.
I am, and you are. And this type of thing, this type of conversation, be it on video live or not, in a living room somewhere, these type of conversations is a integration of the physical and the non-physical knowing that is expanding very rapidly
Yeah.
through, I don't know, I would call it like guerrilla warfare. It's not
Yeah,
like even on
totally.
the alt news, you don't see on the alt news on Gaia TV or anywhere like that saying, hey, you know what? David Manning's been having interaction with dragons his whole life, and Todd Morgan have been having them for the last few months. And what does that mean? You know, I mean, I don't see any discussion about that. I just see, hey, the government has a secret space program and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Uh,
And we
do
know
we?
that shit now. We all know
Yes.
stuff now. And it's like, I think it's important for us to know that stuff. It really is part of the awakening process that the blinkers come off and you start to think, shit, the world isn't as I was taught. But once you
Yeah.
recognize that, there's no point in giving a huge amount of energy to it because you're just feeding it. You're just keeping it in place. It's then time to really focus internally and work on your own processes, your own shit, and clear that so that, well, we establish a new set of frequencies on the planet that isn't tied into the military industrial complex that's running the show here.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
made clear to me years ago now that I spent a couple of years really investigating all of that stuff, and it was really valuable information, the money and how it all works. And then all of a sudden it just switched off, and I was told, okay, your role is to help to lay the foundation for a new world. And you don't do that by giving energy to the old world. The old world is
Yeah.
dying, and you just let it die. And we do that
Yeah.
by withdrawing attention from it. Because, as
Yeah.
you say, it is a circus and it will eventually run out of steam, I think. And it'll do that quicker if we stop feeding it with our attention. Because attention is energy, it's currency in effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So like there's a lot of people by their own description. I'm not judging anybody. I respect everybody's reality. But there's a lot of people saying, hey, I'm waking up. What the hell's going on? I had a Kundalini experience, or I had a visitation, or whatever. And because of our programming, many people, at different ends of the spectrum, I mean, many people feel like they're deficient, or, oh my God, David can do that, but I can't do that, or Todd can do this, but I can't do that. Um, if you had to assist somebody or advise somebody who was fresh, and I said, I had a Kundalini, I got a visit from Merlin, I got these directions, am I losing my mind? Uh, is the level of accessibility so big now that anybody can tap in? And what I mean by that is, like, let's say that when 20 years ago or whatever, there wasn't a whole lot of people knocking on that door, but
Mm.
now that field's expanded, and by virtue of the people that are connecting to it, because they'd be expanding it. But I mean, is it, I don't want to say easy, but is it that simple that people can seek to connect whatever information or data or memories that they want from, quote unquote, the Akashic, or do they need a certain level of training?
I think part of what's happening now is the trainings we have had in other lifetimes are starting to awaken. So you might have had 10 lifetimes in mystery schools in Egypt and South America and China and whatever. That's wisdom and capacities that have been dormant but are still present, and they just upload and start to integrate. So you might find yourselves being able to do stuff that you never knew. I always think there's real value in a bit of training, and the real training is life, is paying attention to your own shit and your own boundaries and all of that stuff. There is nothing, that's the most important thing of all, is that.
Yeah.
But
Can you repeat that? Everybody. I mean, no, I'm serious. It's funny because everything's so paradoxical, but here we are, and you've been doing it for years. People are starting to connect. Like, oh my God, I was so and so in a past life. Oh my God, I'm connecting with Arcturians, and almost like an overemphasization on the higher dimensions. And then it swings all the way back, and you learn, I'm here to be David. David with all this knowledge and whatever I can put together, but um our handling our own shift is the top priority, would you say?
I think, and I stick my hands up and say I'm not very good at it. I'm very good with the energy stuff. That came very naturally to me, and so naturally that I didn't give it much credit or credence, because it was always quite easy for me. It's the human stuff that I struggled with, that I find that really difficult. So that's where I have to work. And that's continual work. That's just ongoing process. I can read multidimensional energy fields, but I struggle with balancing my checkbook and doing the housework.
Yeah.
It's that shit.
But yeah, but it's refreshing and raw. I mean, to say, after your collective experience, to say I still get triggered. I still get challenged.
Yeah, totally.
I still have
Totally.
to be David. I can't live out there all the time,
No.
So I
But
think
the weird
that's,
thing is, I'm starting to experience myself more and more as a field rather than as just David. And that's quite weird. So there's a lot of
yeah,
space here,
yeah,
in effect, in which stuff happens.
yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah. Somebody just put up a message here, and they said that they had a spaceship visitation last evening. And last night I could have sworn something very similar. More and more experiences are being shared, people are opening up about, because that frequency of suppression, that old Middle Ages energy and all that went with it is leaving, like you said.
Yeah.
um how much of this how much of this how much of the dimensional experience that is shared or experienced with the physical senses, how much of that, I mean, what is that? I mean, when somebody pulls up an apparition, or there is a ship, or there is a visitation, or there is a dragon in the room, is this, are we looking at ourselves? Is this our higher aspects putting something in front of us, no different than me walking down to the store and two deer run out in front of me, or like in the sense that everything's a message for us? I mean, what is that stuff? Do you experience that?
Yeah, and it's confusing, isn't it? And I think at one level it is all me. So it is my higher self reflecting things back to me in a way that works for me, in a way that using
Yeah.
metaphor and story and stuff that I can accept. I had years ago, I had a guide drop into my field, and it was a Native American shaman. And when he was present, I could smell, wood smoke, and I could feel furs, animal furs around my neck. And he would say, okay, everything you've learned about healing, put it to one side, because we're not doing that anymore. I'm running the show. And I was like, fuck off. um,
Yeah.
and then he just whispered to me, I'm you in another lifetime. And as soon as he said that, I recognized the truth of that. And there was again an
Mm,
integration. So all of his capacities, and it wasn't a conscious thing, but I just found myself doing things I had never done before.
mm, yeah.
So there is a huge integration of aspects of us, but at some level, we are the planet too. Often when I'm on
Yeah.
a teleconference, I find that I'm in what I term a universal body. So I'm looking at the planet over here, and the sun over here, and the stars,
Mm,
and it's all happening inside me in a
yeah.
weird multi-dimensional sense. And I think that's what
Yeah.
we're doing now, is recognizing we truly are unlimited, but we have
Yeah.
made ourselves minute in these physical bodies. And the guidance that is coming to us is from the part of us that is outside of the planetary
Yeah.
atmosphere. We're locked in here. There's the bigger part of us out there saying, Jesus Christ, I wish they'd pay a bit more attention.
Yeah. Right.
But it's, and now those
Uh,
bands of energy that keep separation active are dissolving. So there's much, much more integration happening all of the time. And it's really beautiful. It's really exciting. But it will always come in ways that you and I as individuals can accept for ourselves, given our own backstory,
Absolutely.
our own mythology,
Absolutely.
that sort of thing.
And you know, I promote a hashtag, the human is the hero. You know, I am soul, the human is the hero. And another part of this paradox is, you know, coming out of this whole trip, pre-awakening or as you're awakening, you know, ultimately there's a question of self-love, self-worth, self-judgment, self-consciousness. The human is little, the human is, you know, on the low end of the totem pole. But there's this other part of it that you are exemplifying and explaining, and that is that all this stuff makes me up, you know. And I think what a great example of that is when this essence came in, you told her to fuck off. We're sovereign in our kingdom, we're sovereign in our space. We're not, I mean, what would the difference be to give power over to something that's you know, obviously external in the physical, be it a government or a partner or whatever, or to one of our infinite number of aspects, theoretically. You know, I mean, there's an importance, I guess that's what I'm saying. There seems to be an importance that I'm Todd and you're David. You're not going to be David again, to my knowledge. I'm not going to be Todd again, to my knowledge. But I'm not just Todd, and I know that. And I think what you're describing by that bigger field is a part of what's happening, is that all of that's coming in to be contained here, to lend to creation, which is, I guess, life itself and the living experience itself. So it is very exciting. It's exciting to meet you. I would normally bug you to stay on longer, but we scheduled another show in less than half an hour. And but I'd love to talk to you some more. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, seriously. And thank you for you know, unashamedly dropping a few F-bombs so I don't get too many more messages about how I do it all the time. But no, it's a breath of fresh air. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and sharing space with us today. I look forward to collaborating with you again. And thank you for the service that you've given to humanity in this universe.
Hey, well, I want to say thank you too, because the output of yours is is phenomenal. You know, it's really amazing what you make available. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me on your show. I've really enjoyed meeting you. It's been great.
We'll see you again, and maybe we'll bring the dragons next time.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Take
right.
care.
All right, David.
Bye-bye.
Best to you and yours.